worst part about being stood up is not the waiting. It's the exact moment you stop pretending she's running late and start pretending you meant to eat alone. I was 30 years old, a high school English teacher in Chicago, sitting at a window table at a place called Bellini's with a reservation for two and a confidence level made for zero. Her name was Courtney. We had matched on an app 3 weeks earlier, exchanged the kind of messages that made me think I still remembered how to be interesting, and agreed to meet on a Friday because Fridays felt like a commitment to trying. She suggested Bellini's. I looked up the menu, realized the cheapest entree was $28, and told myself it was an investment in my emotional recovery. At 7:15, I texted her, "Running late?" At 7:15, I ordered bread so the waiter would stop circling my table like a concerned vulture. At 7:51, I checked her profile and found it deleted. Not deactivated. Deleted. Like she had packed up her entire digital existence and moved to a country that didn't have cell service or guilt. I sat there for another 10 minutes because leaving felt like admitting it out loud. Then I paid for bread I hadn't eaten, tucked the little bouquet of daisies into my jacket like I was smuggling evidence of my own stupidity, and walked 6 blocks home in March rain that couldn't commit to being snow. My name is Jonah Prescott. I teach sophomore English at Lincoln Park High, which means I spend my days convincing 16-year-olds that Fitzgerald matters while they convince me that eye contact is a dying art form. I am not particularly tall, not particularly smooth, and not particularly good at dating, which should have been obvious from the fact that I brought daisies to a first date with a woman whose last message to me was a thumbs up emoji. My apartment was on the 4th floor of a brownstone on Wrightwood that had more character than insulation. The hallway smelled permanently like someone else's cooking. The elevator had been out of order since the Clinton administration, and the light outside 4B flickered in a rhythm I had started to find personally insulting. 4B was Piper Callahan's apartment. Piper was 28, a veterinary tech at a clinic on Diversey, and the kind of woman who left her door propped open on summer evenings so her cat could patrol the hallway like a furry building inspector. We had been neighbors for 14 months. In that time, I had learned the following. She sang when she did dishes. She owned more plants than furniture. She laughed at her own jokes before finishing them, and she looked at me sometimes in a way that made me forget what keys were for. We were friendly. That was the word. Friendly as in, she brought me soup when I had the flu last January, and I pretended it didn't taste like love. Friendly as in, I helped her carry a bookshelf up 4 flights of stairs, and she paid me in homemade brownies and a comment about my arms that I replayed for 3 days. Friendly as in, we stood in the hallway talking for 45 minutes on a Tuesday about nothing, and I walked back into my apartment feeling like I'd been on the best date of my life. But I didn't make a move. Not once. Because 6 months before Piper moved in, a woman named Bridget had handed me back a key to an apartment we were supposed to share forever and told me I was the kind of man people loved, in theory. Theory. Like I was a thesis nobody wanted to defend. So I kept Piper in the hallway, in the category of nice neighbor who I definitely did not think about while grading papers at midnight. Safe. Contained. Impossible to lose because I never tried to hold. That night, soaking wet and holding daisies that had surrendered to the rain. I reached the 4th floor and found Piper sitting cross-legged outside her door in sweatpants and a hoodie that said "Bet Tech," because people are gross, eating cereal out of a mixing bowl. She looked up. Her eyes went to the flowers, then to my face, then back to the flowers. "Oh no," she said. "Good evening. Jonah." She set the bowl down. "Why are you wet, sad, and holding flowers?" That's 3 separate questions, and I object to all of them. She stood up. "Where were you?" "Bellini's. Fancy. How was it?" "The bread was free. That was the highlight." Her face changed. Not pity exactly. Something sharper, like she was already constructing a revenge plan and just needed a name. "She didn't show?" Piper asked. I tried to smile. It came out wrong. She deleted her entire profile while I was reading the appetizer menu. So, technically, she didn't just not show up, she ceased to exist. Piper stared at me for a long second. Then she picked up her cereal bowl, opened her apartment door, and said, "Get in here." "I'm fine." "You're dripping on the carpet and holding gilt flowers. You are not fine. Get in." I got in. Piper's apartment was the mirror layout of mine, but felt like a different universe. Where mine had bare walls and a couch I'd bought off a guy named Steve on Facebook Marketplace, Hers had string lights, mismatched mugs on open shelves, a cat named Otis leaping on a stack of medical textbooks, and a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon even when she wasn't baking. She took the daisies from my hand before I could figure out what to do with them. "These are sweet," she said. They were supposed to say, "I am a functional adult who can plan a date." They say that. They also say, "I peaked emotionally in 2019. She laughed, short and surprised, and put them in a mason jar she found under the sink. Piper found a mason jar the way other people found excuses, effortlessly and for every occasion. "Sit," she said, pointing at the couch. "I'm making tea, and you're going to tell me about this woman who doesn't deserve those flowers or that shirt." I looked down. "What's wrong with my shirt?" "Nothing. That's the problem. You wore a good shirt for a woman who ghosted you, and that's a crime against fabric." I sat. Otis opened one eye, judged me, and went back to sleep. Piper brought 2 mugs to the coffee table and sat on the other end of the couch with her legs tucked beneath her. There was a distance between us that felt practiced. We had shared this couch before during a power outage in November when she came over with candles, and we watched videos on my phone until the battery died. That night, her shoulder had pressed against mine, and I had memorized the exact weight of it. "So," she said, "Courtney. You remember her name? You mentioned her last week when we were checking the mail. You said, and I quote, 'I have a date Friday and I'm only mildly terrified.' That feels like 1,000 years ago. It was Tuesday." I drank the tea. It was peppermint, which I didn't love, but Piper made it, which I did. "She seemed normal," I said. "We talked about books." She said she liked Vonnegut. That should have been my warning. Why? She spelled it Von-a-gut. Piper winced. "Monster." I ignored it because she asked questions. Good ones. And I thought maybe I was ready. I paused. "After Bridget, I mean." Piper knew about Bridget. Not everything, but enough. The apartment I gave up, the wedding we never planned. But I'd started imagining the way she had reduced me to a theory and walked out like the proof didn't matter. "Ready for what?" Piper asked, carefully. "To sit across from someone and not mentally calculate how long until they realize I'm not enough." The room got quiet. Otis purred in his sleep. The string lights made small shadows on the wall. Piper set her mug down. "You know, that's not what happened, right?" "Which part?" "The not enough part. Bridget didn't leave because you weren't enough. You don't know that. I live 12 feet from you, Jonah. I know exactly how much you are." The sentence landed in a place I wasn't prepared for. I looked at her, and she looked back at me with an expression I had seen exactly once before, the night of the power outage, right before she stood up and said she should probably go home. She broke eye contact first, picked up her mug, drank. "Anyway," she said, "Courtney is an idiot. That's generous. It's accurate. You showed up with flowers and a good shirt and she chose to not exist? That's a character flaw, not a reflection of you." I laughed, but something caught in my throat. Not sadness exactly. Something closer to recognition. Like I was noticing for the first time that every time I came home from something hard, Piper was there. Not waiting, not hovering, just there. Like gravity. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Depends. Why were you eating cereal in the hallway?" She blinked. "Oh, that." She rubbed the back of her neck. "Otis knocked my phone off the counter and I went to get it, and the door shut behind me. I was locked out for 45 minutes. And your solution was cereal?" "Mrs. Delgado in 4A lent me the bowl. I had a granola bar in my hoodie pocket. I improvised. You sat on the floor eating improvised cereal instead of calling the super." "The super is Frank. Frank thinks every request is a personal attack on his weekend. I chose dignity. You chose the floor. Dignity has a wide range." I laughed again, and this time it didn't catch. She smiled, and the warmth of it reminded me why I never let myself look at her for too long. Because looking at Piper Callahan for too long made my chest do something structurally unsound. "I should go," I said, but didn't move. Probably. She didn't move either. The rain picked up outside. I could hear it against her windows, which faced the same alley as mine. 14 months of hearing the same rain from 12 feet apart. "Jonah," she said. "Yeah?" She was gripping her mug with both hands, the way she did when she was choosing her words. I had seen her do it when she talked about hard cases at the clinic, animals she couldn't save. She held on to something solid before she let something heavy go. I need to tell you something, and I need you to not make it weird. That is the most ominous possible opening. I know. She closed her eyes. I almost didn't answer the door tonight. You were locked out. You didn't have a door to answer. I mean, I almost didn't talk to you. I heard you coming up the stairs, and I thought about pretending I wasn't there. In the hallway, where I could see you. I didn't say it was a good plan. I frowned. Why would you avoid me? Her jaw tightened. She set the mug down, picked it up, set it down again. Picked it up, set it down again. Because every time you tell me about a date, I have to smile like I'm happy for you. And I'm running out of smiles. The room tilted. I stared at her. She stared at the coffee table. I'm sorry, she said quickly. That's a terrible thing to say to someone who just got stood up. I know, my timing is historically bad. But you were standing there in the hallway with those daisies and that face, and I thought I can either sit here eating fake cereal and pretending I'm fine, or I can stop being a coward for once. Piper, you don't have to say anything. Piper, seriously, you can just finish your tea and go home, and we'll pretend this was a weird hallway fever dream. Piper. I waited until she looked at me. I brought daisies for the wrong person tonight. Her lips parted. Her hands went still. What? She whispered. Every time I walked past your door, I thought about knocking. Every time I heard you singing through the wall, I turned my music down so I could hear you better. When you brought me soup in January, I washed that container 3 times because I didn't want to give it back. I swallowed. Courtney was an attempt to stop thinking about you. It didn't work. Her eyes went bright. She blinked fast. You're serious, she said. I'm holding your cat's paw in my lap right now because it's the closest I've been to holding your hand. Yes, I'm serious. She looked down. Otis had, at some point, migrated from the textbooks to my lap and placed one paw on my wrist like a feline notary public. Piper laughed, shaky and disbelieving. Otis has never done that. He senses emotional vulnerability. Very advanced cat. He once ate a rubber band and threw up on my resume. Everyone's a critic. She laughed again, and this time her whole face opened. That was the thing about Piper. She didn't laugh to be polite. She laughed like she meant it, like her body had decided before her brain could object. I thought it was just me, she said quietly. The hallway thing. Lingering. It was never just you. Then why didn't you say something? Because you live 12 feet away. If I told you and you didn't feel the same, I'd have to walk past your door every day knowing I'd made it awkward. And I couldn't lose you as even a hallway. Her expression went soft in a way that made the string lights blur. You wouldn't have lost me, she said. I didn't know that. You could have asked. I was scared? Of me? Of how much I already needed you without earning it. She unfolded her legs and moved closer. Not all the way, but enough that her knee touched mine. The contact felt deliberate, like a door opening. You earned it, she said. Every time you helped me carry heavy things up those stairs. Every time you texted me pictures of dogs from school because you knew I'd had a hard day. Every time you stood in that hallway and made me laugh until Mrs. Delgado told us to keep it down. She tilted her head. You earned it, Jonah. I looked at her mouth. She noticed. Can I kiss you? I asked. If you don't, I'm filing a complaint with building management. I leaned in, slowly, because I wanted to remember the before. The last second where we were just neighbors and the first second where we were something I didn't have a word for yet. Her lips were warm. She tasted like peppermint and cereal, which should not have worked and absolutely did. Her hands came up to the side of my neck, and I felt her pulse against my jaw, quick and certain. When we pulled apart, her forehead stayed against mine. Well, she said, well, that was significantly better than cereal. High praise. She laughed against my mouth, and I kissed her again because I had 14 months of restraint to make up for and a very supportive cat in my lap. When she pulled back the second time, her expression shifted. Careful, real, We should talk about this, she said. Probably. If this goes wrong, we still share a hallway. I know. And thin walls. Extremely aware. And Frank the Super, who will absolutely tell the entire building. Frank can know. I want Frank to know. Her smile trembled. Really? I took her hand. Her fingers threaded through mine like they'd been practicing in secret. Piper, I don't want to be your neighbor who almost said something. I want to be the guy who shows up, not 12 feet away, right here. She squeezed my hand, then stopped dating strangers for maps. Done. And bring me flowers next time. I literally brought you flowers tonight. You brought Courtney flowers. I received them secondhand. I want premeditated flowers. You want premeditated flowers. You want premeditated flowers. First-degree daisies, with intent. I grinned. Tomorrow. Her eyes widened. Tomorrow? I'm taking you to dinner. Real dinner. Not bread alone at Bellini's, somewhere with actual food and a table where both chairs are occupied. You move fast for a man who spent 14 months pretending he didn't watch me through the peephole. I never watched you through the peephole. Liar. I listened through the wall. Huge difference. Very ethical. She kissed me again, quick and bright, like punctuation at the end of something she'd been trying to say for a long time. We stayed on her couch until midnight. Otis moved between our laps like a referee. We talked about the things we'd been keeping behind the friendly, the time she almost knocked on my door at 2 a.m. because she couldn't sleep and wanted to hear my voice. The time I wrote her number on a post-it and stuck it inside my lesson planner, so I'd see it every morning. The time she heard me laughing at a show through the wall and almost texted me to ask what was funny. We wasted so much time, she said. We weren't wasting it, we were building a hallway. She looked at me. That's either very romantic or very weird. Both. I'm an English teacher. We contain multitudes. Don't quote Whitman at me at midnight. When should I quote Whitman? Breakfast. That word sat between us, warm and terrifying. I stood at her door 15 minutes later. Neither of us wanted to be the one to say goodnight. She leaned against the frame with her arms crossed, looking at me like I was a sentence she hadn't finished reading. 12 feet, she said. 12 feet. Good night, Jonah Prescott. Good night, Piper Callahan. I was inside my apartment for 3 seconds before my phone buzzed. Piper, for the record, I would have shown up. I stood in my kitchen, dripping and grinning. Jonah, for the record, I wish I'd knocked sooner. Piper, knock now. I stared at the screen. Then I walked to my front door, opened it, crossed the hallway, and knocked. She opened immediately, like she'd been standing right there. Because she had. Hi, she said. Hi. That was fast. 12 feet. She grabbed the front of my shirt and kissed me in the hallway with both our doors open and the flickering light from 4B doing its annoying thing and the whole building sleeping around us. When she let go, she whispered, "Now go home. You literally told me to knock. I wanted to see if you would. And you did." Her smile was the kind that rewrites the rest of your night, your week, your stupid, beautiful life. Good night. Good night. I went back to my apartment, closed the door, leaned against it, listened for her door to close. It took 6 seconds, which meant she'd been leaning against hers too. I took her to a ramen place on Clark Street the next evening. She wore a blue dress I'd never seen and boots that made her 3 inches closer to my height. I brought daisies, premeditated, first degree, and she held them like evidence of something she'd been waiting to prove. For the record, I said, pulling out her chair. Both chairs are occupied. For the record, she said, sitting down, I'm not going to delete my existence mid-appetizer. Low bar. You said it. Dinner was easy the way only hard-won things can be. I already knew she hated olives and loved bad horror movies, but I learned she once applied to veterinary school in Scotland just to see if she was brave enough, and that she cried every time an animal she treated didn't make it, and that she kept a list on her phone of names for the dog she would someday adopt. What's the top name right now? I asked. Humphrey. Humphrey. He's a distinguished gentleman. You'll love him. I already do. She looked at me over her ramen. Chopsticks paused midair. You can't say things like that while I'm eating. When should I say them? When I'm not holding noodles and trying to be attractive. You're always attractive. I have broth on my chin, devastatingly attractive. She kicked me under the table, and I caught her ankle with mine and didn't let go. Walking home, the March air bit through our jackets. She shivered once, and I put my arm around her without asking. She leaned into it without hesitating. Outside our building, she stopped. I have a confession, she said. Another one? The soup. In January, when you had the flu. What about it? She bit her lip. It was my grandmother's recipe. I've never made it for anyone before. My mom asked me who I made it for, and I said, a friend. And she said, Eleanor Callahan did not teach you that recipe for friends. Your grandmother's name was Eleanor? She would have liked you. She had a thing for men who read too much and apologized to food. I don't apologize to food. Jonah, you thanked the soup. It was good soup. You said, and I quote, this soup is doing God's work. It was. She shook her head, laughing, and I kissed her in front of our building while the L train rumbled somewhere behind us, and the city did its loud and different thing around two people who had finally stopped being quiet. The next few weeks were the kind of clumsy magic that happens when two people who already know each other decide to fall. We went on dates that started with knocking and ended with hallway goodbyes that got longer every night. She left notes under my door. I left daisies on her welcome mat. Mrs. Nambarai, Delgado and 4A figured it out within 3 days and started leaving cookies for both of us with a note that said, finally, we made rules. Rule 1, if something scared us, we said it out loud. Rule 2, we didn't skip the showing up part just because we lived close enough to take it for granted. Rule 3, Otis had visitation rights to both apartments. One night, 3 weeks in, Piper sat on my kitchen counter while I cooked pasta. Her feet dangled. She was reading my copy of East of Eden and narrating her reactions out loud in a way that would have driven any other person crazy and made me want to marry her. Jonah, she said, and her voice was different. I turned from the stove. If this falls apart, she said, I don't want to lose the hallway. I set the spatula down and walked over, stood between her knees, put my hands on the counter beside her hips. I can't promise we won't scare each other, I said. I'm still learning how to be someone's without disappearing into it. But I can promise I won't make you carry the brave part alone. You knocked first. Let me catch up. Her eyes glistened. She hooked a finger through my collar and pulled me closer. You've caught up, she whispered. You caught up the night you crossed the hallway. I kissed her, and the pasta boiled over, and neither of us cared. By summer, there were signs of us everywhere. Her coffee mug in my cabinet, my books on her nightstand, a spare key she gave me wrapped in a note that said for emergencies and loneliness. Otis had claimed a spot on my windowsill and refused to acknowledge that he didn't pay rent at both addresses. 6 months after the night I came home with wet daisies and a deleted dating profile, I found a letter in my mailbox. Lease renewal. 1-bedroom apartment, 4th floor, Unit 4A. Mrs. Delgado was moving to Florida to be near her grandchildren. Her apartment was opening up, bigger than either of ours. 1 bedroom, 1 lease. I brought the letter to Piper's apartment that evening. She was on the couch with Otis, reading a novel with a bookmark that was actually a dried daisy petal. She looked up, saw the envelope, raised an eyebrow. Jonah Prescott, if that's a bill, I'm not in the mood. It's not a bill. I sat beside her. Mrs. Delgado's apartment is opening up. She went still. 4A, I said. 1 bedroom, bigger kitchen, slightly less aggressive hallway lighting. Her lips parted. Bigger kitchen, slightly less aggressive hallway lighting. Her lips parted. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking if you want to stop living 12 feet apart and try 0. Piper looked at the letter, then at me, then at Otis, who was cleaning his paw like he'd already made the decision. We've been dating 6 months, she said, and neighbors for 20. That's not the same. It's better. You've already heard me snore through the wall. You don't snore. Then you have nothing to worry about. She laughed, but her eyes were shining. She took the letter from my hand, unfolded it, and read it slowly like she was memorizing the terms. 1 lease, she said. 1 lease. Both names. If you want. She looked at me. I want. I kissed her, and Otis meowed once like a witness. We moved into 4A on a Saturday in September. carried boxes up the same stairs where I'd once helped her with a bookshelf, and discovered my arms were a topic of conversation. Her plants colonized every windowsill. My books filled every shelf. The daisies, fresh ones, sat on a kitchen counter in the same mason jar from the night everything changed. That first evening, after the boxes were stacked and the pizza was ordered, and Otis had inspected every room and deemed it acceptable, Piper stood by the window looking out at the alley we used to hear from separate rooms. I came up behind her and put my arms around her waist. She leaned back against me. "Same rain," she said. "Same rain. Different side of the wall." I pressed my lips to her temple. "Better side." She turned in my arms. Her hands rested flat against my chest. She looked up at me with the same expression she'd had that night in the hallway, cereal bowl in hand, choosing bravery over silence. "I would have shown up," she said softly. "That night at Bellini's. If it had been me, I would have been there before you." I pulled her closer. "I know. With better flowers. Impossible. And I would not have deleted my profile. No, I would have updated it." She smiled. "Status occupied by a man who knocks." I kissed her in our kitchen, in our apartment, in the building where we had spent 14 months pretending 12 feet was a safe distance. It never was. It was just the exact width of the courage neither of us had until a stranger named Courtney did us the enormous favor of not showing up. What would you do if the person you'd been looking for turned out to be right across the hall? Have you ever realized that the distance between you and the right person wasn't miles, but a single conversation you were too afraid to start? Tell me your story in the comments. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.